Okay, so a big thing that I've always dealt with when it comes to Accel enrichment, it's probably been one of the harder things for me to dial in my opinion. But so this is the method that I use, and it may or may not work for you, but this is how I've always dialed it in. So these settings could potentially change when you change injectors. So I've got it dialed in pretty good, I think. As you can see, I'm tapping the throttle and it's not really like stalling or anything like that. So it's still not perfect because the fuel table is not tuned. So you obviously want to tune in your fuel table first. But so I usually just tune this just enough so I can like drive the car where it's not spinning and sputtering. So the first thing that you actually want to do is actually turn off Accel Enrich. And the easiest way to do that is actually to literally turn this to 100%. That means that it would have to see like a rate of change of 100% before it's doing anything. So we can look here, tapping the throttle does like absolutely nothing when it comes to Accel Enrich. So we'll let it come down completely back to idle and tap the throttle, and you can hear it's kind of rough. So when you fit bigger injectors, when you install in bigger injectors, it's hard to tell whether you need to add fuel or remove fuel when it comes to Accel Enrich. So we're going to assume that my table is tuned, and it's not too bad. It's not perfect by any means, but it's okay. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to follow the cursor here. So that's idle, and you can hear it kind of stumbling a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're just going to highlight those cells. Let's see here. So we're basically going to highlight these cells, and this is just temporary, okay? This is just to test it, and we're going to max out the fuel or add a ton of it. And so you can see that it actually feels better. This may be way too much fuel here, obviously. So there we go. So now that we know that it does in fact want more fuel, so if you adjust that and changing it to the value of 100 or changing the value to 120 or whatever, and it gets worse, if you have to bring the fuel down, then that at least tells you which way you need to go with Accel Enrich. So with the EMU, I'm not going to go into this, but the EMU has a ton of different Accel Enrich tables here, and I'm just going to go over it really quick. So this is pretty simple. This is by coolant, and basically think of it as like your warm-up table. So sometimes you need a little bit more when the air is cooler, and keep in mind these values are definitely not dialed in by any means. It's just enough for me to actually drive the car without losing the fillings in my teeth. The next one is RPM factor. This is pretty cut and dry. It adds 50% based off of, it will add, at the lower RPMs, it will remove 50%, while the upper RPMs, it'll give the full amount. And these may have to change. TPS factor, same deal. This is literally TPS versus how much fuel it's going to add. The hardest one here though is TPS rate. So this is like the rate of change. How much does it change and how much fuel it adds? And so what you're going to be looking at is this value here, which is TPS rate, and that will give you an idea of what it's doing. So hopefully this gives you guys a little bit more insight to how this table needs to work. But remember, the thing about it is that when you're first tuning these tables, it's not perfect. Your fuel table has to be fully dialed in, because all the other tables are based off the main fuel table. So get your main fuel table dialed in before you do anything else. Make sure you turn off Accel Enrichment when you're dialing in your fuel table, and then at that point go back and add it. So like I said, sometimes, man, these cars, it's just unbearable to drive without DTPS or without Accel Enrichment, and so sometimes you will have to kind of dial it in a little bit just to help out a little. So hopefully that offers some type of insight on how I do these tables. Again, there's more than one way to make a hamburger. This is just the way I make mine. So if you have any suggestions or if you do it differently, leave it in the comments below.